Okay, let the record show all selectmen are present. Consent agenda, warrant number 33, dated 3/21/2021. Number 34, dated 3/22/2021. And payroll register number 12, dated 3/25/2021.
Make a motion to pay the warrant.
I have a motion and a second to accept the warrant and payroll as read. All those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Acceptance of the meeting minutes of March 22nd, 2021.
So move.
Second.
I will note there are a couple of edits that needed to be made. I think in your copy I identified the road commissioner as Jeff Drew. I'm going to change that to Jeff Wright. I'll make it right.
All right. All right, seeing no questions, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Old business, Mr. Savage.
Nothing.
Mrs. What? Mr. Moody.
None, sir.
Mr. Gopian.
Yes, I have one concern. The last meeting we talked about the quit claim deed, and basically, I talked to Tim at the meeting, and he takes and has them pay the year what they're out. So like, it was 2018, so if they're quit claim deed, they're paying just the 2018. Okay, the law says after you go into the year without paying your taxes, there's a lien put on your house, and the town will write you a letter. They have 30 days to write the letter for the lien. Then you have 18 months to pay the 2018 taxes. And if you don't, then it goes into foreclosure. Okay, in foreclosure, that's when they come in and they pay the 2018. Most of the people do. Apparently, there's 93 names on this paper that didn't pay the 2019, I assume, right?
Right.
Okay, so they'll get letters saying they owe for this year. How I like to see us do, instead of paying for 1 year, because these people will be on next year's as well, most of them will be on there, because they're always 2 years behind. So what I'm saying is, when they go into foreclosure, in order to get out of foreclosure, get your quit claim deed, I think we should have them pay all the back taxes, all 3 years, other than just 1 year. Because if not, they're just gonna come back, and we're gonna do it again next year, and next year, and so on. And this totaled up to be, what,
It's about 110,000.
yeah, 110,000.
But I don't think I'm sorry. I don't think we can legally do that. Because you're giving them 18
Right.
months for the particular year that you're foreclosing.
The only time the town really has the leverage is once you've foreclosed. And once you've gone past that foreclosure date, then the town meeting warrant gives you, the select board, the authority to do with tax acquired property whatever you want to do. And I was talking to Mr. Gopian earlier today. Last year was a good example. We had 2 properties, one over on Whittier Farm Road and on the lake, and one over on Weston Avenue. And because there have been ongoing problems, every year there's the same problem over and over again, the select board said, give them 30 days to pay everything. And if they don't pay everything in 30 days, then we put it up for sale. And in both of those cases, the people came through on the 30 days and they paid for it. I like the town meeting warrant that gives you the flexibility to take it as a case by case basis. But we certainly can, when you get to that foreclosure, you can require people to pay all their back taxes, because at that point you can do whatever you deem is in the best interest of the town for that property. But prior to that foreclosure date, unfortunately, you can't do anything.
So that is what Mr. Gopian is suggesting we can't do.
Well, if he's suggesting that we make people pay all their back taxes after we foreclose, you can certainly do that. If he's suggesting that we start hounding the people now that owe their 19 taxes that haven't foreclosed yet, we can't do that.
I mean, if it's something the board wants to talk about, and we certainly can put it on an agenda and go through it. The only thing I will say is that this is the way we've done it. in the past, and we have some people who, I don't know if people will come back a second time after they've gone through that foreclosure piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. In my experience over the last couple of years, we've only had a few repeat offenders. And 1 year like Whittier Farm Road was an example. 1 year you extended them some grace. It took them a couple weeks, but they got the money. The next year they were right back in the same boat and they were asking for grace, and you said, look, we gave you grace last year, we're gonna put it up for sale if you don't pay everything. And so,
And from what I see, from what I understand, we're probably as strict in this town as anybody around us. And,
yeah.
I mean, saw it on TV a few weeks ago, Bangor was talking about it. They had places that hadn't paid taxes in 9 or 10 years.
Right.
And they just let them go. So, I mean, I think we're as strict as anybody.
All you really gotta do is grab a town report from one of our neighboring towns, because by law, those unpaid taxes have to be in the town report. So you can look at a neighbor of us and say, okay, they've got some properties that go back to 2015, 2016, so you know they haven't really, tracked it as well as they could have. But
Tim, don't you see a trend in some of these people? Repeated trend, they're doing it over and over in this three-year cycle, so to speak?
And, I've talked with other folks at the town office. Kathy Estes has been there a lot longer than I have, and she's seen these same people for years. And they pay their taxes every year, but for whatever reason, it doesn't strike them as important to pay it early or on time, and they pay hundreds of dollars in fees and interest. But that's just the way they've done it for years.
Was this something we want to bring up again at another meeting? We can have an agenda item and talk about it. I mean, maybe we can have some history of what's happened in the past.
It's a concern, so why not?
So we'll schedule as soon as we can. All right, items of communication, Mr. Town Manager.
Just a couple of things to pass along to you. The school district has posted their schedule for the budget process. So on April 26th, they will have their board meeting to do a final review. I've gotten some emails and numbers and updates that things seem to be going in the right direction with the school board, at least to the amount that they're going to bring to the taxpayer. That seems to be down this year, and that's good. In the first week of May is when they're going to have their meetings at the school. And so I always encourage people to go to the meetings at the school. Anytime people come to me and say, what can I do about the school budget? We'll go to the meetings they have at the school. And that's a public meeting. That's your chance to ask your questions and so forth. So that'll be early May. And they are going to time it so that their referendum election is on the same day as our state and local election. So we won't be holding two elections this year. The only other thing under communication items is I have been talking with a realtor about listing the property at 1162 Lakewood Road. And he is going to handle all of the bids, and he should be able to deliver us all the bids after Friday, April the 9th. So that's all I have.
Okay, new business, number one, review proposed fiscal year 22 municipal budget.
Okay, I gave you a lot of information in your boxes over the weekend. I've given you even more information on your sheets on the table tonight. I just want to make a couple of references. The easiest sheet by far is this one pager, which is new, should be on your desk, new tonight. And that simple one pager is just a summary of all the budget categories. And that shows that our like for example, general government's up 9%, public safety's down 4%, so on and so forth. So that just gives you an idea that if you go all the way down to the bottom, the net to the taxpayer of what we are proposing is down about 2% from last year. But that also includes doing a lot more in capital than we were able to do last year. So I just wanted to refer to that. If you have questions, you can get back to that one later, and then we'll go into a little more detail. What I propose to do is to go briefly through each of the major categories, like general government, public safety, and see where we are on these things if you have any comments. Some of these categories have very little change, so there's probably very little to talk about. But before I did that, some of the members of the Budget Committee are here by Zoom tonight. I think Pat Dolan's here, Randy Bliss is here, Robin Turek, I believe, unless any other folks have shown up. And you can unmute yourselves if you'd like, and feel free to ask any questions, or you can just follow along. One of the things that some of the members of the Budget Committee asked me about was revenues. Now, we have traditionally only looked at revenues when we set and commit taxes. We've never looked at revenues when you do the budget. You only spend your attention on the expenses. But there are some ties that kind of carry through here. And I thought at the very least I would give you the revenue sheet, which is about 3 pages long, looks like this one, and just kind of give you an idea of where we seem to be tracking in our revenues. I think you've heard me say over the last couple of meetings that revenues are doing better than we expected them to do. So we track almost $1 million in revenues, and most of those, 75% of them, come from the other form of taxation, which is your excise tax when you register your vehicles. Right now, that's at the very top of the list. We budget about $725,000 in excise taxes through the month of February. So this doesn't even include March. We were tracking 78% of that number, so we'll be probably about 85% of that number through the end of March. People continue to purchase vehicles. The vehicles that they purchase, the excise tax is based on the original sticker price, so that's always higher. So unless the law changes on that. One of the things that we have to keep a close eye on is item 38, which is bank interest on town accounts. We usually get about $12,000 in interest on our town accounts. As you can see, we're tracking less than $2,000, and I don't think we're going to get there, just because bank accounts are right now less than 1% as what they're paying on interest. As you can see on that first page, we collect revenues through the planning board and code enforcement, a small amount through animal control. On the next page, you see what we collect from public works for the contracts with the state for plowing, what we get back from general assistance. The library has some fees, then we get some rental fees from town-owned property. On the last page, you can see that our year-to-date totals are running about 79%. Again, that's through the end of February. We should be in the mid-80s once we get the March numbers in. And then you have the separate categories of revenue sharing, Betty, and homestead. And homestead and Betty are pretty much always paid like clockwork. Revenue sharing was the big concern from the state. We originally had forecast a revenue sharing of about $650,000. During COVID last year, the state shaved off their revenue sharing and we brought it down to under $600,000, $592,000. But with 3 months to go, we're probably going to get more than $650,000, close to $700,000 in revenue sharing from the state, mainly because the state didn't take it as hard on revenues as they thought they were going to. A lot of the money they lost in restaurants and lodging, they made up for in construction and home sales. So that's been a good balance for them. So,
Can I just say on the homestead, if anybody out there is watching, if you do not have the homestead exemption on your property, then you need to get to the town office and get a application and get that filled out. For this coming year, it needs to be filled out by Thursday, probably Wednesday, right?
yeah, April.
Probably Wednesday. So if you're seeing this at all and you don't have the homestead exemption, please go out and, because I've given that information to a few people in town and they didn't, they did not have it on their property.
What I've found, and I was talking to some of my neighbors as well, is if you have got a mortgage for the first time, and your mortgage takes that escrow and pays your taxes out of that, sometimes they don't know that there's a homestead exemption available to them.
Right.
And so that's something that can save them up to $500 in taxes each year.
Right. If you don't know, you can check your tax bill, or you can go onto the town website and look on the tax commitment for 2020, and you can find your property, and it's right there, it says it right there. I have a question on the bank interest. Has the bank interest since last year dropped that much?
It has, and I really wasn't paying attention to it until I started looking at the county budget from last year. And Patrick Dolan, who's the finance director for the county budget, he showed a drastic drop in interest rates to the county budget committee, and I said, that can't be right, but turns out he was right. So they really have dropped off quite a bit. Any other questions on revenues? All right. So where I want to spend the bulk of my time is this 13-page handout, which is the line-by-line budget. And again, if you look at it or we come across things that you want information on, please bring it to the chair's attention and slow me down here.
We're gonna go through this tonight. We'll come back next week
Right.
and vote each article.
Right,
last
you
week.
don't need to take any action on this. This is where we kind of work through things to see if they're all on the same page. But on the 7th of April, which is next Wednesday, at 5 o'clock will be our meeting with the Budget Advisory Committee.
So between now and then, if questions come up, please ask them.
Right.
If you don't ask them tonight.
So the first thing I'll talk about is personnel, and we're under general government on page 1. And this will be the same for all personnel in all departments. The highway department has a 3% wage increase factored into their contract. And so we mirror that amongst all of our personnel, full-time and part-time. So you'll see a 3% increase for all personnel built into this budget. If you come down to item number 25, FICA and Medicare, and then item number 30, ICMA match. I mixed those two up. I meant to put an additional $10,000 in the ICMA match, and I ended up putting it in the FICA, so I've already fixed that and reversed it. But the reason I put an additional $10,000 in the ICMA match is that's the retirement match that we talked about last meeting, which could be a possibility in my compensation this year. So I thought, if it's okay with the board to maybe continue that discussion at this point, is that something you want to factor into this budget? Keeping in mind, the only reason that we would have to add money to the budget if you offered me a money in lieu of taking health insurance, it would cost you $10,000 this year, because I'm the only full-time employee that doesn't take health insurance. If in the future you wanted to offer it to all full-time employees, it wouldn't cost you anything in the budget because you'd be offering that in lieu of health insurance. So do you feel that's something you want to leave in this budget right now?
Have we broached that subject with anybody else about taking the cash instead of?
I haven't spoke to any employees. I did speak with Tammy and Jeff just to kind of gauge what they thought about it. I didn't do a polling of all the employees to see whether they would take that as an option. So I think what you're left with, if you wanted to do something this year without opening up the personnel policy and the highway contract, you could offer me a separate employment contract with this benefit. With me having a separate employment contract, that would go beyond what's in the personnel policy, and then you could wait to offer it into the personnel policy at a later time. If that's too complicated or you don't want to do that, then we can certainly strike it from the budget. I don't mind either way. It's not something I'm driving for. It was something that was offered as an opportunity.
I was gonna say, go ahead, Mr.
I like the idea you just came up with, Tim. Leave that 10 in there and do a little bit of homework to these other people to see what kind of interest or what kind of feedback you would get from them. Because overall, it's a money saver for the town, and it's putting money in their pockets at the same time.
As long as, I think Dave, last time we talked about this, mentioned that, the folks who we offer to, who decide to take it, they need to make sure, prove to you that they have coverage somewhere else. I mean, that's really important.
Yeah, proof of coverage is,
Yeah.
is required.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right, if there's no other questions on that, I really don't have a whole lot more to talk about on page number 1. On page number 2, we have budgeted $13,500 for our auditor. Typically, our audit runs about 11 to 11.5. We've budgeted in a little bit more money because we will most likely have to do what they call a single audit this year, because we've received over $750,000 in federal grants. And a lot of those grants have to do with the work at GoLab. When you reach that threshold, you have to reach out to your auditor and do a separate special audit on those federal funds. And they've given us a quote of about $2,000 as to what that would cost.
I know the legal line here, I know we have a lot of things coming up. I mean, is that wise to put that down to 5,000?
This line here handles mostly our admin legal. We have a separate fund that pays our legal bills for the lawsuits with Eagle Creek and Madison Paper. It doesn't come out of this line.
Okay.
This is if we need advice on something in admin or personnel.
Yep.
You'll notice janitorial, we reduced that line from 5,000 to 4,000. We have picked up a new janitorial service, and they seem to be doing well for us. If you missed it, you know that Christine got done at the end of December. But we've used a new service, and they seem to be doing the job. And we've staggered a little bit about how often we clean and what we clean and that sort of thing. And so that's resulted in a little bit of a net savings. So that's all I have on page 2. And page 2 ends the administrative part of general government, which is the folks at the town office. Page 3, we start talking about the planning board, code enforcement, not really many changes in the budget for the planning board. We talked a few weeks ago about the changes in code enforcement. I have raised that pay for code enforcement up to $45,000. We won't exceed more than, $10,000 in code enforcement pay this year. And down at the bottom for the contracted planner, I budgeted $6,000. We've already spent more than that this year, but we've had a very busy planning board year. That contracted planner is Joel Greenwood out of KB Cog, and he attends every planning board meeting. And for the past year, the planning board meeting has really been doing double time, where they meet twice a month, where traditionally they only meet once a month. If we were to find a quality code officer, we may be able to lean on the contracted planner less, if the code officer is able to do some of those things. So I did take out any health insurance for the code officer, because the more I've talked with other towns, I think the likelihood of hiring a full-time code officer is going to be very slim. And we may just have to continue to patch things together. It was 2 times this week the emails came across from other town managers saying, hey, do you have a code officer you could recommend to me? We lost ours. And so it's a statewide problem. So. Boards and committees is about the same. Elections, there's a significant change in the election budget, mainly because we're in a different world when it comes to elections. The technology that the state requires us to have has gone up about $1,000 or $1,500. We no longer have election days, we have election seasons, so we have to hire more help, more part-time help. So that's why that election budget is $4,000, and $10,000 is a let's see if that works number on an odd year where we don't anticipate a very busy election. When you come into the election of 22, then you've got all the House and Senate seats that are up, and then of course we all just need to be praying about 24 when we have another presidential election.
We have governor too at
And you have a governor's election in 22, that's correct. So you can see, due to some of these changes, like code officer, adding to the retirement, adding to the election, the net general government budget is up from $604,000 last year to $660,000 this year. That's an increase of 9.3%. So any questions on general government? What we've covered there. Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So does that number account for this new rule on part-time, time off, whatever deal that is? Tim, you can speak better on it than I can. But I know there's some type of
Right.
expense there for part-time employees now.
What's that called? Let's see.
Earned paid leave.
Earned paid leave, right?
Yeah, that.
So, yes, because at this point right now, that only applies to a very few number of our employees that aren't already getting more than the minimum.
Okay.
So, fortunately, it's a very small number. All right, if no other questions, I'll go to page 4, which is the public safety. So we contract with the ambulance service and we contract with the county for police services. Both of those budgets went down. The ambulance service, they reduced the amount that they charge the towns, and so that budget went down from $92,000 to $75,000. The police contract, because of some turnover of some longer-term deputies and hiring some newer deputies, that contract went down to $440,000. That 440 number for the police contract has been about the same, give or take 5,000 or 10,000 for the last 4 years. So we've really been able to maintain a good, steady consistency in that number. And last year, the total cost was $425. So I think we were within $15,000 or $20,000 of the total cost last year. The rest of that page is fire. The only comment I'll make on the fire department is that Don and I have been working over the last couple of years to try to raise the hourly wage we pay our volunteer firefighters. And everybody understands that there is an hourly rate that they get paid if they come to a work day, if they come to a training. If they respond to a call, they get an hourly stipend or an hourly rate of pay. And for years, that was just barely minimum wage. And so with the changes in minimum wage, we've tried to keep that up there. Right now, our firefighters get paid to train and respond at $13.50, $13.49 an hour. Within this budget, we're trying to get that number up close to $16 an hour. So if this, and there's not a significant change in this budget. One of the reasons we have that cushion is they have not responded to as many hours over the last 3 or 4 years. The total number of hours that they've put in has been kind of stagnant. So we have a little room to try to get that number as close to $16 an hour as we can. I'm hoping that there might be some of this money coming from the federal government that might help first responders, that we might be able to work into that figure through the year. So if you turn to page 5, you'll see that the net budget for the fire department is pretty much unchanged. It went from $110,000 to a little under $112,000, about a 1.5% increase. Animal control, I've kept that budget pretty much the same. That is another position we will need to find this year, as our animal control officer told us he's no longer able to do it. And that, you know, when you talk to other municipalities, good luck. So I'll be working with the sheriff's office to try to make sure we have the proper amount of coverage, but finding someone that's willing to do that job is getting difficult.
I think we had some talk about that last week, right? We have some retired people that might be interested.
Well,
Moving forward, Mr. Person.
you can see at the bottom of page 5 that due to the reduction in the contract figures with ambulance and police, public safety is a net decrease of about 4.6%. So there's no other questions on that. Go to page 6. Page 6 is the category with the public utilities, storm drains, waste disposal, hydrants, and street lights. Storm drains is the amount that we reimburse the sanitary district. And in years past, the board may remember, we've gone back and forth on this issue as to what we pay the sanitary district for. Currently, our understanding with the sanitary district is we only pay for the maintenance and any repairs that they may do to the storm drains. And so they have a bill from 2020, and then they'll have a bill in November, December of 2021. I'm budgeting to be able to pay both of those bills. That's why I'm budgeting $50,000. The last bill that we had from the sanitary district for maintenance and repairs was about $19,526. Now, I know Mr. Gopian is on the sanitary district board. I didn't know if there had been any talk about asking the towns for more money.
No.
Okay. So basically that $50,000 that I'm budgeting for the storm drains will take care of 2 years worth of maintenance and repairs, and so we should be called out going into the next fiscal year. Waste disposal, I don't know if anybody remembers talking about tipping fees, but tipping fees are up and the tonnage is up, therefore the budget has gone up $30,000 for what we pay waste management in both the front gate and the back gate. We budgeted $225 for this year. We spent $243 in 2020. We will probably spend more than $240 this year. So we're hoping that by putting that budget number up to $255, we'll be close to covering that cost. No change in hydrants, which is also known as fire protection. And I'm trying to scale down street lights a little bit. Maybe we're going to have some savings as MEW and CMP switch over to LEDs. So because of the extra in storm drains and the extra in waste, that's about a 9.7% increase in utilities. Any questions on utilities? Seeing, hearing none. Page 7, Highway, Public Works. Very little to talk about here. There's not many changes at all. I did talk with Jeff about maybe coming down a little bit on the diesel line. A couple of years ago, we spent almost $40,000, but that was with a significantly hard winter. The year before last, we spent less than $30,000. This year, we're probably going to spend less than $25,000 in diesel. So we'll have some savings there. If you turn to page 8, you'll see that there's virtually no change, less than 0.32% in the total highway budget. As far as the total winter roads and summer roads, very little change there. I just draw your attention to near the bottom, category 44, that talks about special projects. If you've been around these budgets for the last couple of years, you realize that if it's been a relatively mild winter and the highway department has a significant savings at the end of the year, they like to request that they carry money forward. And when they carry that money forward, they put it into that special projects line. That allows the road commissioner the flexibility to do things like he's going to do this spring on Hayden Street. Whenever we have that flexibility, we put that money into special projects. That gives the road commissioner that flexibility to do these projects that may come up during the year that we may not necessarily have budgeted for. It's worked well. It worked well with Glenn. It's worked well with Jeff. And so just keep an eye on that. We put $5,000 in there, but hopefully we'll put several more dollars in there after the budget is passed and the carry forward requests come to you. So any questions about that? That's kind of been our strategy. So net less than 1% increase for the Public Works Department. If those questions on page 9. Page 9 has both the recreation and the cemetery categories. No change in recreation, in fact a net drop, but I did get a note while I was on vacation. And I'll let Tammy maybe speak to it if you will. We haven't done any changes in rec stipends in years, is that correct?
Correct.
And is there a request, or maybe can you think about it request?
I think about is what it was.
Okay.
They're increasing some of the stipends up at the high school and junior high. So they've just kind of asked.
So I don't plan on doing it in this budget this year, but we may want to relook at how we stipend our rec directors. Now, of course, last year you had a lot of programs that were just not feasible at all, so people were doing all sorts of different things. But as we move into more normalcy, maybe we can relook at those stipends. So as the budget is presented right now, there's really no change in the recreation. We do have a pretty significant change in cemeteries, and this is my fault, and I apologize for it.
Can I ask a question
Oh.
on Preble Avenue?
Yep.
We've got enough money here to make sure that we have the road in proper shape, and I just walked in there a few minutes ago, and that first culvert you come to is a disaster again. Looks like looks like the rocks have crushed it, and I don't know, so.
I know Chris talked to me. Did Chris talk to you about that road?
He didn't necessarily talk about the road. Our discussion was the parking lot down in one of the ball fields. Which pipe are you talking about, Al?
When you first come in, I came in from where the pole barn is there.
Yeah.
You come in that I walked in right there, and when you go to the left, you go down by the ball field.
Yeah.
Right there, looks like that might have caved in again.
That possibly could have over the winter, if somebody was running over it
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah. So I didn't know if there was anything we could check out down there and see what we need to, if we got enough money to get that at least.
Well, what's typically been happening in the last couple of years, if Chris has any money left over in his rec department, he'll let me know, and we'll haul some gravel up there, because I don't know if you've noticed over the years, there's usually some stockpiles of gravel by the
Right.
softball fields. Well, that's what that is, and then through the course of the summer, when the crew has time, we'll go down and put that on the roads, and we've been doing that for 2 or 3 years now. It seems to be working pretty good.
Right. So I mean, as long as everybody feels we have enough to get by, I mean, I just I want to make sure we're not letting that go.
I'm comfortable we have the money to take care of that this spring.
Oh, yeah, we'll get it.
Okay.
We'll look at it, see what it needs.
All right.
Cemeteries, the cost really hasn't changed much in the cemeteries. It's what we take out of the interest that we earn in our perpetual care account. So if you're familiar with the interest that's earned every year for the perpetual care of Forest Hills, for whatever reason, several years ago, we discovered that we weren't following the ordinance. And the ordinance says you're supposed to take this interest out and apply it against the budget and reduce the budget for Forest Hills by that interest. So when we looked at the accounts, we had mingled 2 accounts. We had the perpetual care account. What do you call the other account? Just lot sales, right. So lot sales from other lots outside of Forest Hills. And so we split up every time we sell a lot, some goes to perpetual care, some goes to other cemetery maintenance. We were using the interest a few years ago on those two accounts combined, but the ordinance doesn't allow that. The ordinance only allows for whatever's in the perpetual care account to go towards the mowing costs here. So we run in the red for the last 2 years on cemeteries, and Tammy has had to move money from the cemetery interest earnings account to try to cover this. We haven't used any principal because by ordinance you can't use any of the principal to pay for mowing. But we have to raise what we raise from taxation this year from a budget of $27,000 to take care of all the cemeteries to $35,400. So that's $8,000. That's a pretty substantial amount of money. But basically that will make us even for the shortcomings we've had over the last 2 years, and we'll be able to get back on track this coming year. So, any questions on cemeteries? We'll be mowing in a couple weeks. Page 10 is community programs. There's a couple of changes here. The food cupboard, who no longer uses this facility, they traditionally have asked for $14,500. This year they added to their request added $1,000 to $15,500. I think that's a fair trade for the fact that they're not using the utilities here at this building, and there's a significant savings to that. You'll see that at the bottom, we've added Lakewood Theater. That goes back to action of this board when they were discussing whether or not we automatically give Lakewood Theater $5,000 out of TIF. Now we put it in the community programs budget, so it's voted on at town meeting, but it still can be, that $5,000 still is eligible to be paid for out of TIF, and I'll try to communicate that well in future budget discussions and at town meeting. The other significant increase is general assistance, which is the last colored line there. We budget 15,000. 2 years ago, we spent 18,000. This year, we've already overspent the 15,000. Part of that is COVID. If we do get some federal money, we may be able to put some money back against the overages in general assistance. But based on what we're seeing on the trends in rent and heating oil and so forth, I'm recommending that we raise that general assistant budget up to 17,500. The state does pay us back 75% as far as revenues. So total community services is up primarily because of adding Lakewood, the additional ask for the food cupboard, and the additional budget for general assistance. Any questions on community services?
On the food cupboard, do they go like the ambulance on percentage of number of population?
No, they don't. The Humane Society does. That's down there.
Yeah.
But the food cupboard does not go based on population.
So,
If you remember right, well, if you remember right, we used to give approximately $7,000, and one town meeting, I don't know, probably 10 years now,
I wasn't here.
probably 10 years ago, Peter Sirois stepped up and said, let's make it 14,000. And the town meeting went with that, and that's what we've been since. So it isn't, I think it's just a figure they come up with. I don't think it's based upon any per capita or anything like that.
It's similar to what they ask in Anson. I think they ask around 11 or 12,000 in Anson. So we pay a little bit higher, but certainly not per capita.
Yeah, no.
All right, if there's no other questions on community services, remember page 11 is the library. Library budget is pretty much flat year over year. We put some things in, took some things out, but this is the budget that Julie and I agreed on, and I don't have any comments other than I thought she did a good job. Mr. Moody?
Tim, how'd they make out on the roof? Is that all taken care of and all the maintenance that they had planned?
Yep, the new roof is on the schedule, so that, for the roofer. So my guess is April, May, you'll start to see that process take place.
Okay.
But yeah, they were worried that they wouldn't be able to get on the schedule if things got busy, but they held the spot for us. And so,
Hopefully, so we don't get any more damage over that.
right. So if no other questions about the library page?
I just have one question. 3% raise, that doesn't go for like, and it has to be full-time position, is that what it is?
3% is across the board, all of our full and part-time employees.
So like the janitorial one here?
For the library?
Yeah.
No, we put a fixed budget in the janitorial line for the library, and then the library trustees decide how much they want to pay Bobby Bishop, who does their custodial. And so the trustees pay him based on the budget we set, and then they may add to that budget if they want to.
Okay.
Anything else on library? All right. Page 12 is town-owned property. We are realizing some savings here at this building for electricity and heating fuel, based on the fact that we do not house the food cupboard anymore. We're going to continue to do some small renovations. We're working on finishing the handicap bathroom on this floor. I thank the highway department for the work that they've done on that. So we're seeing a little bit of savings at Old Point, the playground, boat landings, and the Weston Avenue site for where we try to facilitate the ice rink every year. So overall, the amount that we're budgeting for town-owned properties is down about 3.5%. Any questions on that? All right, so if not, I will take you to the top of page 13. And so the top of page 13, this very top line here, this is the non-capital budget. So we had a non-capital budget of $2.762 million that we're working on this year. With all those ups and downs, we're proposing a non-capital budget of about 2.859, or about a 3.5 increase before we get into capital and any money back from undesignated fund balance. So any questions on that? All right. Seeing none, if you have this other part in your packet that looks like this, it talks about capital spending, this has a little bit more detail. So just as a reminder, when we build the town meeting warrant, the articles will simply say, do you want to raise $215,000 for road paving? We don't identify the roads in the town meeting warrant, mainly because we're not always guaranteed that we can get there. But we build the budget based on this information. And certainly if people ask at town meeting, we'll say, these are the roads we intend to pave. But the article only says, will you spend this much? So on that handout, you see on page 2, proposed capital spending for paving. These are the roads that we're identifying this year. Ames Hill Road, Orchard Road, and the rest of Preble Avenue from Schuster to Ward Hill Road. And that's a total of about $215,000. Now also going on this year, we will be doing half of Russell Road, and we'll be doing a chip seal overlay on Golf Course Road. Those two roads are TIF eligible roads, so they will not go to town meeting, but we have budgeted for them in our TIF budget for the upcoming year. So any questions about the road work that the road commissioner is proposing?
Those are within the plan that we have put together, I mean, that you put together.
RSMS, right?
Yeah, that's the RSMS plan, the financial plan. Those were the roads that had come up. Some of them have gotten moved up from last year that it didn't get done.
Right, we didn't do the golf course road.
Didn't do the golf course road, and I believe that was the only one.
So I talked to the road commissioner today. In that TIF budget, it's not mentioned here, but we've also just set aside some money for sidewalks. So we're doing $20,000 each year out of TIF for sidewalks. That doesn't get us as far as we hope, but we always want to stay active on it. And we've got some money set aside in there to finish that little section of River Road where the new entrance to the gravel pit is. If the road commissioner is able to work out something with the landowner there, we may be able to move that road a little bit further away from the edge up from that gravel pit. And so that's again in the TIF account. But what we're going to town meeting is for roughly $215,000 for Ames Hill, Orchard, and Preble Avenue. The next category is equipment purchases for highway. We've talked about putting $100,000 away for a wheeler, a new plow truck, and then putting $85,000 toward the purchase of a new sidewalk plow / skid steer. If you're all familiar with the sidewalk plow that Larry Lightbody uses every storm, that's kind of been on its last legs for a couple of years now. The road commissioner has identified a piece of equipment that is unique, so that it will operate as a sidewalk plow, but it also has several attachments that can operate as a skid steer as well, which would replace our very old skid steer up to the garage. And we have some savings in equipment that we're going to try to utilize before the end of this budget year. And the road commissioner has put out bids for a replacement 1-ton pickup. So we're not proposing that at town meeting because we hope to be able to afford that with the money we have left in this year's budget. So any questions about?
What would it cost to finish the plow truck off in '21?
Roughly, probably, I'd have to guesstimate about $80,000.
Or 80,000?
Yeah.
Would that be in our interest, our best interest to do that?
For next year?
No, for this year.
So are you saying, should we raise that amount from 100 to 180?
Yes.
And that would allow them to get that new plow truck a year earlier?
Possibility, if that's what the town's wishes are.
We always talk about it. I think that, we're down quite a bit. I think if it's necessary, I mean, what happens next year that something happens? I mean, we know anything can happen, that we don't, then we can't put the 85,000 in, and we aren't gonna be able to buy that truck. Snooty.
And I agree with you, Al, 100%. And the reason I say that is because we cut his budget quite a bit last year to begin with. This year, this budget looks very well, looks very good. If there's a year that we can push a little bit to pay off and get a new truck, I'm all for that. Because I think we're in good enough shape by looking at this budget so far in the capital line. I think we could afford to do that. But that's.
I could get
It's a
some numbers
call
together
there, Jeff.
this week, some budget numbers that you guys would like.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea. I mean, it might not be as much as you think.
When do you expect the bids back for the 1 ton?
The bid opening is on Monday morning, 10 o'clock.
Okay, so by Wednesday for the budget meeting, we'll know what those numbers look like.
Exactly.
And then you'll be able to get maybe a little bit more detail on that one by Monday.
Correct.
Okay.
And I don't know, how does anybody else feel? I mean, that's only 2 of us, so,
I agree, I think that's a good idea, if we can do
I mean,
it.
what truck are you replacing? What year or truck are you?
The one that will be replaced is a 2004.
17 years old.
Yeah.
That's, seems to be quite old, I mean, as far as trucks go, but.
Is that hammering you on maintenance, Jeff?
It has been over the years. We put some money into it. We put some new suspension underneath it 2 years ago, put a clutch in it a year or 2 ago. But yeah, we put some money into it, and it's time. That's the truck that would be replaced next year. But if you guys would like to move it up a year, that's great.
Did we get anything out of that truck?
Well, we'd get a trade-in value for it, of course we would.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Yeah. And of course, the better shape that it's in, the more you're gonna get out of it. You keep hanging on to it, you're gonna get nothing for it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Go.
Yeah, so we haven't budgeted anything for a new truck, right?
We're planning on setting aside 100,000.
But we have 0 set aside right now.
We have a little bit left over from last year. I think we have
Correct.
20,000 or
Yeah.
so from last
How
year.
much?
About 20,000 left over from last year.
So if that, I mean, if it's 180, then we're
At 160.
we're at 60 now, right?
So we'll have to, that's why I wanna see what these quotes come in on this 1 ton.
Yeah.
Because once we have that kind of finalized, then we kind of know what we're looking at. We have to talk to the lady behind the glass.
She almost
Purse
fell over. Yes, it's sad.
The money for the 1 ton, is that something that was set aside last year?
That's money it was set aside last year for the JCB loader, but the actual cost of that loader came in lower than what we had set aside for it. And so we were able to utilize that savings. Otherwise, we would have just carried it forward into this next year's budget. I told you, Jeff, they felt bad for gutting you last year.
And you notice I didn't say a word about chip seal. I'm off that subject.
You're the only one complaining about it, Al.
I'm not anymore, Jeff. I'm on board, boy.
So,
All it's on golf course and not on Pond Street.
So at the bottom of page 2 still is set aside for a fire truck. And this is a similar situation, probably a little more dire. Although, I mean, obviously, fire trucks do not leave the garage as often as plow trucks do. But the oldest truck in our unit is 31 years old. I've talked about this before. It's a manual transmission. Only 3 people know how to drive it. It's got a stainless, it doesn't have a stainless steel tank and it leaks. So we've been trying to write a grant for this for the last 3 or 4 years. Writing a grant is like playing a slot machine. You just put your application in, you pull the lever and see what you get. Towns around here have gotten grants from FEMA, but so it's not impossible.
We have one in now.
We have a grant pending right now, so hopefully by May, we'll get an idea of where that goes.
So what
Does
What's the cost for a fire truck?
To replace the pumper truck that is 31 years old would cost you about $350,000. So we have a $325,000 grant request in. We have some money set aside last year, so we've got about $50,000 in the bank this year. If we don't get that grant, I'm recommending, and talk with Dawn, that we put 150 toward it, so that come this time next year with town meeting, he'd be able to actually have a final number of what that truck would cost and go to the town meeting to ask for the difference to get it ordered. Similar to a probably longer process than the plow truck is to get a fire engine built. You're probably looking at 12 to 18 months by the time it actually gets here. So it's a long process. So on the good chance that you do raise 150,000 and you get the grant, you have that money in the bank for the fire department to utilize for other equipment needs that they might have. And since most of you sit on the ambulance board, you know that the ambulance rescue is possibly on its last legs. And so the three towns may have to look at what they want to do with the rescue unit, or the town of Madison may want to look at what they do with the rescue unit. So that's the thinking behind putting a request for 150,000 out there.
Tim, I would think that this grant, with this new business going in here at Madison Paper, and that product could be flammable,
Yep.
possible, that would strengthen that grant quite a bit.
It may, but keep in mind that it's a 1% return. So they have enough funding to award 40 fire trucks nationwide. That's not even one per state. And they get 4,000 applications. So we're one of 4,000 applications that's got to try to get to the top of that list to be within 40. So and every year we talk about our economy, we talk about the changes in our economy, and products that are being made. We try to update it every year to make it as good as possible. So any other questions about fire equipment? All right, top of page number 3 is proposed capital spending to spend $30,000 or $31,000, if my math is not correct there, to purchase the 55 streetlights from CMP that are in East Madison and replace them with LEDs. I will just say, it is my job as the town manager to try to think of all sorts of clever ways to save the town money. But I am losing steam on this particular project. At first I thought it was a great idea. Other towns had done it. Skowhegan bought all their streetlights from CMP. Rumford bought all their streetlights from CMP. But since 300 of our streetlights are owned by MEW and only 55 are owned by CMP, and when I spoke with MEW about maintaining these streetlights, they really weren't that excited about it. I thought they would like the opportunity. So I've kind of cooled off on this idea. Plus, I'm looking at the fact that CMP is already going to change all these lights to LEDs eventually. I know where every one of these 55 lights are now, and I can probably talk to CMP about reducing some of our streetlights, as we probably have too many in some cases where there aren't houses like Lower Mills Road and other parts of East Madison. So unless somebody is absolutely sold on this idea, I'm willing to pull it.
I guess I don't understand why MEW is not willing, or I should say, not excited about helping the town out. They are part of the town.
Well, no, and I don't want to paint MEW in the wrong light here, because Marty and I talked about this. They have a limited amount of capacity as far as the size of their crew. And they're not really interested in taking on the liability and the potential work of servicing these lights in East Madison. Because the town, if we bought them from CMP, we'd only own the lights. We wouldn't own the poles. So MEW's like, right now we work on our lights on our poles. And there's a little bit of liability, a little bit of concern about them working on someone else's pole to fix our lights. So that it wasn't it wasn't as a good fit as I thought it was. And the potential savings to the town is about $5,000 a year for a $30,000 outlay. So you get your money back in 6 years. But at the same time, even if CMP just changes to LEDs, we're gonna see a savings of about $2,000 or $3,000 a year just to reduce. And CMP's already committed, they're gonna do it. And MEW has already started doing theirs. If you've been behind Rennie's, MEW changed all their lights behind Rennie's to LEDs, and it's a significant difference, and it'll be a significant difference in what we pay.
And the lights through town look really good. I mean, they're all lit up.
Yep.
I noticed that the other night. It hadn't been like that before.
So I guess I thank the board for letting me think through this out loud. But as I was putting these numbers together, I don't think it's the right time to do this.
30 more, Jeff, towards your
Yeah.
truck. We're only about 30 short now.
So any questions on that light project?
Yeah, I think that's good.
So finally, we come down to fund balance. As you recall, last year, we did not take any money from fund balance. Traditionally, the town usually realizes enough savings and extra revenue to bring forth about $200,000. If you've ever been to town meeting, you've seen that typically as part of a warrant article. Last year, we really didn't know what revenues were gonna be like. When we got our audit, we realized that we were able to recover all of the $400,000 we carried forward 2 budgets ago. If you remember, 2 budgets ago, we carried forward $400,000. Our fund balance remained pretty much unchanged in our audit at the end of the last fiscal year. So that means that we haven't lost the amount of fund balance. I believe we're going to gain this year because our revenues have come in stronger, because we are getting some money from the federal government. But I think 400,000 is a safe figure to put back. And it helps the taxpayer understand that, yes, we're raising more money for paving roads and buying trucks, but we're gonna use the money we've got in savings to cover that cost. So their tax rate will hopefully not go up. The tax rate should go down.
All right, any questions? So we will,
How much money do we have in our fund balance right now?
Currently, the town has about 1.4 million.
1.4?
Yeah.
And how much do we spend a month? Said Tammy question.
Well, do you want to know before we pay the school or after we pay the school?
1 month,
With the school in it?
yeah, with the school in it.
Was it 600, 700,000?
Yeah, I would say 550 to 600, yeah.
And the school is 400 of that.
Yeah.
So we operate basically on about $200,000 a month.
A month.
And it does fluctuate when you have to pay your county tax and when you have to pay your hydros. So just, that does fluctuate a little bit on those quarters.
That's it.
any other questions? So we will meet again next
April 7th.
Wednesday.
Yep.
And
At
we
5
will
o'clock.
go over these again with the advisory board. And they will vote, we will vote, and they will vote.
Yep.
And we'll move it forward, and so you're gonna look into the truck, finishing the truck
Yep.
off.
So by that time, and hopefully I will send out as much information as I can to the advisory board by the end of this week. And maybe wait for some of the numbers to come in Monday for the capital purchases, but they should be able to get the bulk of the information this week. I have invited all of them to attend in person. I think we could probably space out enough in this room to have the members of the advisory board. I do know that some of them are more comfortable by Zoom, so I would expect maybe 8 or 10 advisory board members here with us. So I think we can do it all in the same space. And just so you're aware, maybe I didn't mention this, that due to the governor's mandates on openings and public meetings and so forth, we should be able to have town meeting in the auditorium like we normally do. People will just have to space out a little bit more than they're used to, but When, you'll probably still be wearing face masks, but we won't have to worry about doing upstairs, downstairs, remote, all that stuff this year.
Probably the permanent amount in there is probably what, 500,
400,
400?
yep,
Or 75, gonna be 75% of that, right?
right.
So, I think we should be 300 people or so, we should be okay.
If you get 300 people at town meeting, then somebody's in trouble.
We pray for a quorum.
Depends if they got white hair and blue hair. If they got that, then we're in real trouble. But, that being said, selectmen's concerns, Mr. Moody?
You know, the only thing I got to say is, thanks, Tim. I like the looks of the proposed budget. I don't think we could do much better than the percentage that we're dealing with right now compared to last year. And I like the idea that we kind of shortfall Jeff last year, but maybe we can make it up to him this year and still be comfortable with the budget. But good job.
Mr. Goby? Mr. Webb?
I agree with Ron, yeah, great job, yes, thank you.
Mr. Savage? My only thing would be if anybody's watching and you want to run for selectman, school board, water district, sanitary district, electric works, the time is now to come out and get your nomination papers and get them back in. I think they have to be in by April 9th. So if anybody out there is interested, please come on out. All right, citizens' concerns. Seeing none, looking for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to second to adjourn. All those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. We're adjourned at 7:37.